Hello, my name is Ed Mitchell, and today's how-to video series will look at creating a daily activity. Let's first look at the question, what is a daily activity? A daily activity is a person doing a task for a period of time at a location. An example of a daily activity is John spent 3 hours repairing potholes at Babbitt Lane. A daily activity is the most common way that work is entered into PubWorks. Besides a daily activity, a crew activity is the second most common way to enter work in PubWorks. We frequently get the question of what is the difference between a daily activity and a crew activity. So before going any farther, let's just quickly review the differences. A crew activity has multiple employees, unlike a daily activity, which is a single employee. Crew activities allow the user to predefine a set of employees, equipment, and materials to speed data entry. A daily activity allows you to enter a contractor's work directly. It also allows for enhanced material entry. So now let's look at a daily activity. So we're now looking at the PubWorks screen, and in order to go to a daily activity, we go up here to the top under PubWorks Data, and here when you click on PubWorks Data you see there are daily activities, root activities, and crew activities. So we're going to just click on Daily Activity, and this will bring up your daily activity screen. Again, this is the most common place for data entry in PubWorks. So we're looking at the daily activities, and so first thing, let's sort of go through the various items that you can capture with a daily activity. So here we're looking at the daily activities screen, and we're going to start off looking at what you're going to be entering in terms of the person or the contractor doing something. So here is where you would enter the employee or the contractor for data entry. You're going to be entering hours for that employee. In addition, you enter the date that the work is performed, and you also are going to be putting in the labor type or pay rate for that employee, and that can be anything that you set up in the system. Next, you're going to pick a location. The location may have a location feature, such as a sign on a street. You'll be entering a task, and within that task you may actually be putting units. So in this case I put in pothole repairs, and I put in also that I did 12 potholes. Other options are the task modifier, the fund name, also project. So this is where you would put in if this is to be assigned to a special funding project, also whether or not this is part of a service request. You put in your equipment, you put in your materials, and finally down here at the bottom there's a summary of the hours worked by this employee put into the system. So far for the date of November 11th I've put in 4 hours for John Garfield. Also for the week so far I've only put 4 hours in. So as I enter additional hours for this employee, I'll know whether I've entered the correct number for him for the day, and also whether it's reasonable for the week. Finally, here at the top of the record that has the equipment and materials, there's also a tab called Direct Job Cost Items, and this is where you can enter material that is sent directly to the job site. Also, it allows you, if you wish, to attach it to a PO and an invoice. This is not used very frequently, but when it is needed, it can be very helpful. So before we go any farther, let's take a quick look at some of the settings that you can have on the daily activity. So if I go to System at the upper left, go down to User Powers, this is going to bring up a little screen where I can click on this tab, third one to the right. It says Activities, and so first thing I'm seeing here is the secondary tab, And this allows me to say whether or not I can enter 0 employee hours or 0 equipment hours, things like that. A lot of people do not want to be allowed to enter 0 because that isn't a valid number, and it usually means that you just forgot to enter anything. However, there are times when people want to capture that some work was done, but they don't want to attribute any cost to it, and so they would use the 0 hours. And so this is where you would put that change in. The other tab here that is probably more important is under Activities, and it's the Primary tab. And here you can, first of all, select where or which values you want to reuse when you go and save a record and you want to re-enter a new record. It will allow you to have the record automatically populate with the previous record's information. In this case, it's the employee, the location, the task, whether or not it's part of a project, and the equipment. The other thing that I can do that's very handy is perhaps hide codes. The reason you'd want to hide the code is the code isn't used very often and people don't know what it means. So in my instance, I have, for example, the project just has the project name. It doesn't have the code because, again, everybody knows the project by the name and not by the code. And I can set any of these up so that the code is hidden, whether it's the employee or the location or etc. And it just makes the screen a little bit cleaner if you don't need to use the code. And this again is up to you and whether or not the codes for employees mean anything or not. So let's enter some work now. So to enter work, I'm going to go to Add at the top, and this will create a clean slate for the first time that I enter something. I can start typing in the employee's name, for example, and notice that we have both the code and the name boxes. If I use the drop down for the code, it's going to have things in code order, and if I do the drop down under name, it's going to have things in the name order. So if I know that the person I want is this John Garfield, I can just start typing in GAR and it's going to take me there. It's going to default to today's date. It's also going to default to the regular labor type. If I need to change any of those, I could just use the drop down and it will give me that information. Likewise, under the date, I can either use the up or down arrow to go forward or backward. Also, I can just go in and if I want to type in the date in the format 11/11/11/14, and it will fill in the correct format in the system. I'm going to put in the hours, so let's say that he worked 3 hours. If they did overtime, I would put in the overtime here. That would be reflect regular overtime rate. I'm going to go to the location code and our name, and I'm going to enter a location. Now let's get a little bit fancier here, and I'm going to look at this L box, and notice that we have boxes above these fields. So we have the E up here under employee, L under location, F under feature, T under task, etc. And so what does that do? Well, that allows me to do a quick search of everything that's in the system. So let's say this person did something at City Hall. So I'm just going to type in city, and I get to CIT, and I see here that my choices are City Hall and citywide. I'm going to pick City Hall, and it's going to fill that in there. So whenever I use one of these search functions, it's going to give me a choice of various fields that I can search in, and it's going to quickly find what I need. Now I'm going to go here to the task, and again, I don't know the code, but I know the name is plumbing, and so I just start typing that in, and it's going to take me to that particular task. If I need units, I would put units in. This is not one that units is required, so the task unit field is not highlighted. Also, as I'm going along, notice that the field that I'm working in turns to orange. It will tell me where I am working. Next thing, I'm going to go to equipment, and I'm just going to use the drop down and go to, let's say they're using the Chevrolet 1500, It's going to fill in this case, the hourly rate. And one of the options I have is that it will capture the hours for the employee for the first piece of equipment. If I have multiple pieces of equipment in, after the first one I will have to put in how many hours or miles each of those was used, depending on how that's set up in the system. And let me add some parts here. So I'm going to put in that I used plumbing miscellaneous parts. I'm going to put in that I used one, and that the cost is not what is the default in the system, but instead was $45.95. And so I'm now going to save this. Now, if you notice down here at the bottom, the summary for hours, this shows now that I've put in 7 hours for this day for John Garfield. And since I am putting in his work, I need to put in, let's say, an extra hour for his total of 8 hours. So I'm going to go here and go to Add New. And notice now that it's filled in the employee, the location, the task, and also the equipment that the vehicle that I was using. So I'm going to put in that did 1 hour, but at City Hall, instead of doing plumbing, let's say he did some electrical work, and so I'm going to just click electrical, and I'm going to save that. And now notice here I have 8 hours in for John Garfield for this day. A few things you may want to note. One is, since I've entered this information, and notice that it has an activity ID here. If it says new up here under activity ID, that means that you have not saved that particular activity. If it has a number, that means that it has been saved. The other item that I want to point out is that as you go along, if you made a mistake and you need to change something, notice that the box right now, most of the letters are grayed out. If I need to edit this, I have to go up here to the edit function, and with that edit function I can then go in and make any changes, but it goes from being grayed out to being dark letters. Now let's look at a couple other things that we can link to the daily activity. So I'm going to go up here to the edit button and click edit. So now everything is darkened, and I'm going to go down here to the lower left, and notice that I have down here project name and also service request number. These are two items that an activity is frequently linked to. So let's look at linking to a project. All I have to do to link this to a project is go in and look at the name, and if this electrical work was part of the 2014 City Hall electrical upgrade project, I can just click on that and save it, and now I can go to the project, and this information will be in that project with the cost and the work done by John Garfield. Now I'd like to show you how a daily activity and a service request can be linked. But I'd like to start with a new record with no information in the system. So I'm going to close out of daily activities and now open it back up, so it's lost the information about John Garfield. I'm going to go to add, and notice everything is blank here. And so the first thing I'm going to go do is go down to service request. I know that the service request that this is in reference to is 1712, and I am now going to go back up here and put in the name of the person who did this. But before I enter the name, notice that the location here was completed based upon the service request information. Likewise, if the service request had a location feature, it would also be populated from that service request. So it's very handy to just start by putting the service request number in and then going back up and starting to enter, for example, the name of the employee. So I'm going to put in this John Garfield again, and I'm going to put in 1 hour, and I'm going to put in the task was electrical, and I'm just going to save this now. And one of the options in PubWorks is that when I close this daily activity or save this daily activity, it asks if I want to close the service request. So in with an activity, the service request number will populate the location. Also, the saving of the daily activity will pop up if I want to close the request or not. And I'm just going to put in that the electrical work was done, and I'm going to click OK. So from this activity, I have closed service request 1712. A couple other buttons at the top that you may want to know about. One is the sort button, and with the sort button I can go in and click on that and determine how the records are sorted. The most common would be either by activity date or by activity ID. So let's say I'm going to put in activity ID and I want descending order, and then the next one would be, let's say, date and also descending order, and then I'm going to click sort. And so what that does is when I open up the daily activity screen, I'm going to see the last activity first, and then they will go down from there. So I'll see the newest one first. If I go to the very end, to the last, then that's the last one that I have in the system. Another button that you may be interested in is the filter button. The filter button can be very helpful. It can also be a problem in that you get it set and you forget to unset it and you wonder where your activities are. So let's just take a quick look at that. So I'm going to click on the filter, and it's going to bring up a box here. So notice that I have 27,736 activity records right now. And that's an awfully lot, and I probably don't want to be looking at that many on a regular basis. So I'm going to change the time frame, and let's say I just want to see what I've put in for this month. So I could just, or the last few days. So I'm going to say I want to see what I've put in for the last 2 days, and I'm just going to click OK. And so now this shows me the records that I've put in, and I can sort of quickly see whether or not I've entered somebody's work because they're going to be here. If I want to, I could also just say I want to see what I've put in for John Garfield in the last 2 days, and if I want to, I could save the current settings. And now I'm going to close out of this. And now if you go down, you'll notice that I only have 3 records. And that's because I've set the filter, and I know I've set the filter because there is the little asterisk right here by the word filter. So to get rid of the filter that I put on, and remember that frequently when you are looking for an activity and you don't find it in the system, don't panic and think that you've lost that activity. Go up, look at the filter record or the filter button. If it has a little asterisk, it means I have it on. So just click on it, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to clear all the settings that I have. And so I'm back to 27,736, and maybe I want to change my time frame now, so I'm just looking at just this year's records, and I'm going to click OK. And so now it's down to 5,476 records, and I'm going to save that display. And now if I go back to my activities, I have in all the activities for 2014. So the filter function is very useful, but it can also be a problem, and don't forget that you have it turned on. This concludes the general overview of how to enter a daily activity. If you have any questions or want more information about how to do this, please don't hesitate to contact PubWorks support. Either email support@pubworks.com or call 888-920-0380 extension 2. Thank you and have a nice day.